I'm Tom Landon. On tonight's episode, we'll learn what it takes to heal through music. Welcome to What It Takes. Recent advances in neuroscience have proven what many have said for years, that music heals and soothes the soul. For people with spinal cord injuries and traumatic brain injuries, music therapy has become an important tool to facilitate healing. My guests are both associated with programs funded by the Commonwealth Neurotrauma Initiative Fund to provide this groundbreaking therapy to Virginians. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
So I'm joined today by Noel Anderson from Anderson Music Therapy, and correct me if I got that wrong, and Jacole Thomas, who works with the fund. Before we get started talking about music therapy and everything else, I always just like to start by, how'd you get here? What's your background? So we'll start with you, Noel.
Sure.
How did you end up doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so long story short, when I was trying to decide what to do for college, music had always been a huge part of my life. And so naturally, I was like, all right, I'll do music. Started music ed because that's one of the only ways to make money through music, right? So started to study music ed, did my observations, and was like, ooh, I don't like this. Googled careers in music. That was the first time I heard of music therapy when I was a sophomore in college. So ended up transferring, and the rest is history from there.
That's great. And Jacole, you're not a music therapist, and you made that clear in our introductions, but you are the program administrator. You administer this program that really brings amazing therapy and treatments to people all over the Commonwealth. But what's your background? How did you start doing what you're doing?
So after college, I worked for a non-governmental organization and I spent 13 years with them, traveled to various countries where we administered our program. And after that career, I transitioned into state government and doing what I have been doing, which is program management. I love that. I love to up the level that the program is currently operating from, and I think I do that well. And so I ended up at DARS, Department for Rehabilitation and Aging Services, after a few other state agencies. And so it was the Commonwealth Neurotrauma Initiative that pulled me in.
Well, and behind every successful program, somebody's got to be keeping track of where the money's going and how it's spent and looking at the future. So that's an important thing. I'll start with you, Jacole. I feel like I'm pretty well informed on what's going on in the Commonwealth, but I'd never heard of the Commonwealth Neurotrauma Initiative. So what's its history and how's it structured?
Okay, sure. So interestingly enough, there is a little bit of a celebrity tie, I guess you could say, but I'll save that for just a second. So there was a neurosurgeon here in Virginia at one of our teaching hospitals who approached the late Senator Emily Corrick, who is the sister of Katie Corrick, and wanted her to sponsor this bill to get some type of funding and program for the research of TBI, traumatic brain injury, and spinal cord injury. And so she did take up the sponsorship. And in 1997, it was passed into law that there would be the Commonwealth Neurotrauma Initiative. So that's all it was at that point. There was no funding tied to it. But fairly quickly, a year later, the funding mechanism was put into place in 1998.
And it's an interesting funding mechanism. I was really, it's not like it's directly taxpayer funded. Where's the funding come from?
So DMV arranged that they could apply for suspended licenses. They could apply a fee to reinstate those licenses. And so $25 from the reinstatement fee actually goes to this program.
So if somebody loses their license, there are lots of reasons you can lose your license.
Right. But
among them are, sometimes people who cause accidents, right? And from that, often we have injuries, spinal cord injuries, and TBI. So there's some justice in that, I think. Noel, you are a music therapist. I didn't think of the music therapy programs I've seen and heard of before being funded through the state in this particular way. How is the fund kind of essential to what you're doing?
Oh my goodness, well, it's huge because a lot of times the individuals that we are working with traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injuries, they get on disability because they can no longer work. And so a big barrier to services is finances. So with this fund, we're able to provide individual services and group music therapy services to allow people to have the healing and full health that they deserve.
And while, what you're doing is, there's a lot of research behind it and everything else, I imagine if you're a family sitting around the kitchen table and on disability and you're trying to decide what you're going to spend your limited income on, being able to not worry about. Now,
Right.
How does that work? Is it needs-based, or is it just something that you can offer these services to anybody who comes?
Yeah, so the only real stipulations with the grant are that the individuals in Virginia, they have a traumatic brain injury or spinal cord injury, and the funding is very open as long as you meet those criteria.
Jacole, you mentioned the Virginia Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services. What's their role in what you're doing? Are they overseeing what you do, or are they?
Right, so the Commonwealth Neurotrauma Initiative, it's not a separate entity. We sit within DARS, so I'm a DARS employee.
Okay.
And so there is definitely oversight. Our commissioner of DARS is actually on the board, the advisory board. There is a board of 7. And so DARS is very active. Brain injury, I'm in the brain injury services unit, so there are other entities as well within my unit that focus on brain injury. So it's not a standalone, we have great support.
Okay, and Noel, for those who, and I've never seen music therapy actually happening, I have a sense of what it is, but for those who don't know anything about it, what do you do?
Yes, good question. So it really depends on the person we're working with, their therapeutic goals. It always starts with an assessment to figure out what their therapeutic goals are. Music therapy typically works on non-musical goals. So we're going to be working on things related to cognition, emotions, social skills or relationships, communication. And the way we might do those are, I like to try to boil it down to 4 main ways to make it simple.
Sure.
Songwriting, so it might be as simple as taking a song that the client brings in and then just changing some of the words to suit what they want the song to say. Or it could be building ground up, a whole orchestration, just depends on the client. So we got songwriting, we might take in a song, recreate a song that the client enjoys and recreate that live with what instruments they want to play. We always want to make sure the client has a successful musical experience. So we have a lot of unpitched percussion, drums, maracas, egg shakers, rhythm sticks, things like that that are very accessible. And then if we use pitched instruments like a ukulele or a xylophone, we'll make sure either we tune the ukulele to open tuning, so no matter what you play and you strum, you sound great, you sound like a musician. Most of the people we work with are not musicians, so we want to give them that access. With a xylophone, we might take off the bars that are not in the key, so that way, again, no matter what they play,
hit is good.
It's great. And so that also bridges to improvisation. So making up music in the moment. There's no wrong way. In fact, if you play something you think is wrong, play it again. It'll sound right. So, yeah.
The old joke comes to mind, Doc, am I still going to be able, will I be able to play the violin? And the doctor says, well, I see no reason why not. Good, because I always wanted to learn, right? I mean,
there you
go. We recently recorded a storytelling event at the Grand Theater, and they were using a group of veterans who had been involved with mostly, I think it was more PTSD than neural injuries, but it was amazing to see what that music could do in terms of bringing a group together. Are there those who were kind of skeptical that this sounds like a nice thing to do, but is this really necessary? And kind of what's the science behind the connections that are made when people are physically playing an instrument?
Absolutely. So this is a big question. Yeah. So obviously, before neural imaging, it was like, oh well, I see they seem to feel better. Kind of the music therapists were seeing the benefits, but it was hard to say why. And now with functional imaging studies, we're able to see what is going on in the brain, the parts that are being activated, the parts that are being turned off. And before, we used to think, oh, well, music's uncreative. It's on the creative side of the brain, and that is 100% false. It lights up so many areas of the brain. The different aspects of music, the rhythm, melody, timbre, all those different aspects actually light up different parts of the brain. And so we're able to use music purposefully to be able to activate specific parts of the brain. For example, there's been research that shows like the corpus callosum, so that's like the middle part that connects the two hemispheres of the brain. In musicians, and not just professional musicians, but even just amateur musicians, that part is thicker and it's stronger. And what that means is information can be processed between both sides of the hemisphere more efficiently, quicker. And so with that idea in mind, if we are teaching clients an instrument, then essentially they're able to make parts of their brain stronger. It's like an exercise for the whole brain.
It's like working anything out, you know, it has other unintended consequences sometimes. Now, you all at the fund, you're not just funding therapy, right? You're also funding research. So a lot of what you all are supporting, I'm sure, is supporting, you know, then be able to put it into practice. When it comes to deciding, I know about half of the money, a little less than half of the money goes to fund therapy and about half goes to research. Is that correct?
Correct, 47.5%.
How are you figuring out which research and things you want to fund?
So we don't just do what we want to do. It's
Right.
based on code, and code says when they wrote this program into code that 47.5% is for research, 47.5% is for services, and the other 5% is to administer the program. So we typically run in cycles. If we do a research grant, then the next time we'll do a services. And so when Anderson Music Therapy Services applied, it was a services time. We had a total of 11 applicants, and Anderson Music really went to the top of the pile. We thought this was very innovative and they were doing great work. And even just how you explained it, Noel, that's what CNI is all about, really helping them to move as much past the trauma of the injury as possible. There may not be, of course, a healing, but can they continue to progress and live a full life?
Yeah, and Noel, it sounds like things have changed a lot since you started in this and over the history of music therapy, and you talked about that a little bit, but I'm curious, you know, sort of as a result of the research and things that go on, as a whole in the field, does a session look different now than it might have 10 years ago?
I would say for 10 years ago, no. 20 years ago, probably.
Okay.
You know, music therapy, we, just like any other therapist, work in different kind of models. So some therapists might work in more of a psychoanalytical model. Some might work in more of a like dialectical behavioral model or a developmental model. In this regard, we're working in a very neurological model. And so
Right.
looking at the brain, how the brain's affected in the non-musical parts of the brain, and how we can create change through the music.
Tell me about, I'm sure you have a binder full of these, but tell me about it. Maybe walk me through a success story of someone who came in and, you know, really, really benefited from the music therapy.
Yeah, wow. So over this year, we've been able to serve, I believe it's been over 70 people through the CNI Trust Fund. And one in particular that stands out is an individual who they said that, you know, they had been through years of therapy, had traumatic brain injury, and also, you know, as you mentioned the PTSD.
Right.
A lot of times this does coincide together. And so they had years of therapy, and in what their quote, I wish I could remember it verbatim, but essentially, you know, what years of talk therapy couldn't touch, music therapy was starting to heal. And so that, when I read what they had wrote, I was just like, this is why we do what we do.
Right, right. And age range? I mean, I imagine you work.
Yeah, so we have littles, all the way toddlers through older adults that we're supporting through the CNI Trust Fund.
And yeah, I imagine, I mean, you have 2 locations in Roanoke, I assume that you're also communicating with other people across the state. In terms of, tell me about your staff and what the money from this fund is able to support for you.
Sure. So yeah, so we do have 2 locations. We are able to open a location in Cave Spring area in Roanoke to be able to have more of our therapists together and be able to support more of our CNI clients there in person. And then we also actually see people throughout the state through teletherapy, which one of the benefits of 2020 was that we discovered music therapy actually works online. It wasn't something that we were doing often because we didn't, why? Why would we do that?
But when you're talking about somebody with a spinal injury,
yeah.
getting them there and back, that probably opens up a whole...
Absolutely. It takes down one of those barriers, for sure.
Jacole, how does Virginia compare to other states when it comes to this? Does this fund exist anywhere else, or not this fund, but I mean in terms of being able to actually provide services and research, where do we sit within the national picture?
That's a great question. And honestly, one that I haven't explored too deeply. I am
you don't
about
have to know everything when you come
I'm
on the
about
show.
a year in
Okay.
with DARS. So, but what I can tell you, there are lots of states, of course, that are addressing the issue of brain injury and spinal cord injury. Virginia is really forward in a lot of ways that possibly other states may not be doing, because again, this started way back in the 90s for us. And so yeah, actually, you have me a little curious
Giving you a
now.
little homework there. You
Yeah.
can get back to us on that. Noel, when somebody comes through your doors for the first time, what goes into the design of a treatment plan? I know you're not just starting them right off.
Yeah.
What do you do first?
Yeah, so we always start with an assessment. We are very holistic therapy, which just means we look at the whole person. So we're gonna look at, socially, relationally, how are you doing? Emotionally, communication, cognitively, motor skills, the whole thing. Psychologically, how are you doing? And then through that and through talking with them, if that's an option, then we figure out, okay, what are the long-term goals you want to work on? What are the short-term goals you want to work on? And design a whole treatment plan based on that.
How long I know this is the kind of question you can't answer, but when someone comes in, and they say, well, how long am I going to have to do this? What's the answer to that question?
Yeah, so with the CNI Trust Fund, specifically 12 weeks.
Okay.
So we in our individual programs, we have 12-week funding set aside for each individual. In our groups, we run those for 24 weeks. And then just standard, we usually, when a client asks me that, in just my practice in general, we develop goals and objectives that can be met we hope to be met within 3 to 4 months. Of course, we never know exactly how long that'll take.
Sure, and this question just occurs to me, but because this is you're providing treatment to people, is outside of the CNI, is this something that, does insurance typically cover music therapy or no?
Good question. Yeah, so it's case by case. It depends on the person's insurance, depends on the CPT codes we use, depends on the person's diagnosis. And so it's really something that right now we are struggling with to get that funding, which is what makes this trust fund so important, because that barrier to funding is huge for music therapy in particular. We need more state lobbying for that to be able to be recognized as a medical service that can receive third-party reimbursement.
I mean, at least you have, because of the funding you are able to get, you're able to tell some stories, right? And
Yeah.
you've got some connections, and I'm sure, while your clients may not always be able to lobby for you, family members and others can do that, right?
Yeah.
In terms of your work, Jacole, if you could tweak the program a little bit and make it a little better, what would that look like for you? I know you've only been doing this for a year, so I'm not putting you on the spot.
No, not at all, because that is what I do. Like I said, I'm always, when I come into program management, I'm looking at what can be better about this program, where can we be more effective, more efficient. That's how I always approach it. So I came in the door with that mindset. And one of the things is we need to award more grants. There is funding there, especially because COVID put a halt to some of the things that the CNI program was doing. And so, you know, again, Anderson Music Therapy Services applying was awesome. As I mentioned, we had 11 during the cycle that Noel applied. We had 11 applicants. We only awarded 2, and that was just based on quality of applications. So we need more grantees to apply to the program with quality proposals. We are looking to fund these proposals. So that's definitely one of the things. And then awareness about that the Commonwealth Neurotrauma Initiative even exists. You know, visibility and awareness. We're on, you know, your show now, so that's a good thing. But that's what we're trying to do. And hopefully there's someone who says, oh, I never heard of them. I didn't know anything about them. And there's an organization out there who needs funding and says, wow, we're doing the work. You know, we're barely surviving. I want to take a look into this program. So that's one of my immediate goals and has been.
And because our viewing area is quite extensive, and we cover from Lynchburg essentially to the western edge of the state. So are there others doing the same work that Noel is doing in, you know, in other parts of our region?
Well, I can tell you that Noel and Anderson Music Therapy Services was the first that we had come across. So if you are out there, go to our website.
What is your website?
Our website is www.vacni.virginia.gov.
Because surely, I know that, like, for example, I assume this is still the case, but when I was a student at Radford University a long time ago, there was a music therapy program there, I believe.
Yes.
So you would think there are other people. So if you are out in our region, you should definitely look into an application. Are you an evangelist for this program with your colleagues around the state?
Oh, with the CNI?
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, they're fantastic to work with, and they're giving access to services that people that wouldn't have had access to otherwise.
Right. What's some of the other, this is not your program, you're not administering these other programs, but what are some other things that DARS, is the Virginia Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, what are some of the other things they do?
So with DARS, there's vocational rehab, where they're working with individuals who need counseling, various services. There are so many grants, federal grants, they don't work in the same way, but where clubhouse programs and other organizations are receiving funding, where individuals can, you know, go and that are receiving services, we support those programs. DARS is a really varied entity, a varied agency. So we're really doing a lot for a lot of different individuals. I would say absolutely visit our website, and that's dars.virginia.gov. And yeah, go through and see what, you know, would be of interest to you. I would encourage that.
And in your work, you talked about, you know, the percussive instruments and the you know, perfectly tuned ukuleles so that it all works. I assume that there's some cultural component to that too, right? You have to adjust to who's walking in the door, right? Do they like country music? Do they, you know, what do they like?
Oh, yeah.
So how do you help? You know, how do you help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a general rule as a music therapist is use client preferred music. And so whether that's hip hop, country, some new age, like whatever it is, that's where we're going to start first.
And is there homework? Are your folk? What do your folks do?
Oh, for our clients or for us?
Well, let's talk about for
practice.
both. But yeah, for them, what, you know, when they're not in a session, obviously, there's a chance for them to continue to build those connections.
Yeah, so it depends on the person, but a lot of times we are trying to, well, always we're trying to help them generalize to their life. So we might, if we're helping them build coping skills, then we might have them do music-assisted relaxation exercises at home. And that way they can help to regulate their nervous system. If you practice that every day, you're gonna feel a lot better. You're gonna uplift your mood. A lot of our folks have reduced symptoms of depression, anxiety by practicing the skills that we're using in the session at home.
Well, I mean, I think we could talk about this for quite a long time, but remarkably, we are out of time. So if you'd like to know more about Noel's work, you can visit www.amusictherapy.com, and for information about the Commonwealth Neurotrauma Initiative, we've given it before, but it is vacni.virginia.gov. For What It Takes, I'm Tom Landon.